Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to my live stream. Um, Hello, Dupechuks. Welcome. Let me know if you can hear me. Give a thumbs up if you can hear me. Am I clear? Let me know. Okay, I think there's some lag, so I'll just wait a bit. Let me know if you can hear me. Okay, good, good, good. All right. Yoruba dude, welcome to my live stream. Thanks for joining. Who else is here? I'll just wait for about 2 minutes and then we'll get straight into it. Hope you are all excited to get into Unreal Engine. We have a lot to cover, but it's going to be a good ride. Just wait a little bit more and then we'll get straight into it. That's good, that's good. I'm happy you are looking forward to it. It's going to be very interesting. So just, it's going to be five sessions. So today is the first of five. So every Saturday for 5 weeks essentially. So that we can, you know, take it slow and steady, and you have time to practice what we go through every weekend. So that's the basic idea. Okay, I think I would start now. Um, all right, so welcome to Unreal Engine for visualization from 3ds Max to Unreal Engine 5. I'm going to cover renders, animation, and interactive experiences. So who am I? My name is Alexander Ago. I'm a 3D artist. Um, I have a background in architecture, but I've been doing ArchViz for the past 13 years thereabouts. I have a company called ArchViz Studios where we create real-time interactive solutions for clients in the architectural industry, automotive, and engineering industry. And then, yeah, these are just a few of our projects. So I want to just talk about a little bit of how I got into Unreal Engine, essentially. It's way back when I started my journey. Like most of us that started a while back, were introduced into ArchViz or visualization with 3ds Max. And one challenge I had was I couldn't get animations done easily. What a 10-second clip would take days to render, and I couldn't afford to, use pay or build a render farm. So I stumbled upon Unreal Engine, I think in 2017, and that was Unreal Engine 4, and it really opened up the doors in terms of what was achievable. I was able to get high quality animations and in record time. So that really changed the game for me. And now that we even have Unreal Engine 5 with a lot more features, a lot more advantages, it has just, opened up the floodgates essentially. So um, in terms of, and that reason why I would say Unreal Engine is the way to go in terms of visualization is because you are not limited to just ArchViz, even though that's where a lot of us are starting from. Learning Unreal Engine will open up your mind, your eyes to the fact that there are other industries that you can apply, visualization, right? So, I mean, we all know about architecture and engineering. I've been fortunate enough to work on some automotive projects. So essentially, I'm based in the UK, and a lot of automotive companies nowadays sell their products direct to the clients on their websites. So in a company I've worked previously, we created car configurators whereby clients can swap materials, change specs of the car live on the website, and then feed that into the spec sheet before they, send in their order. So all that was done with Unreal Engine. So, we have the automotive industry. Unreal Engine is used in movie production. If you've watched the Mandalorian, the series, that was done with Unreal Engine. Then obviously, if you're a gamer at this point, there's almost no. I'm very sure you've played some games that were made in Unreal Engine. It's also used in robotics, broadcast live events, simulation and training. Like the list is endless. So Unreal Engine opens up the door for you in many other industries. Um, some other things to look at is the fact that Unreal Engine is free. So there's no, I mean, apart from the fact that you have to have a relatively good system, there's no price point to to get started with Unreal Engine is free. Um, I mean, you only start paying when you make, I think, above, I'm not sure, I think it's either 100K or $1 million. So it's free to use essentially. Um, it's real time. So as you start creating your projects, your lighting, your materials, you can see changes you make and all of that in real time. So that's very powerful. It's where the industry is heading because nowadays everybody wants everything quickly, fast, so industry is moving towards real-time solutions to things. And based on the fact that you have many opportunities, your earning potential is greatly increased. Okay. Um, some of the things that students have asked me in the past, or issues that they've had, basically is the fact that they think that they need to be a programmer, or that they need to know how to program to use Unreal Engine. And in as much as programming does help, you don't need to. I don't know how to program. Unreal Engine has a visual programming language called Blueprints, which is what I use to create all my interactive projects. So, but the funny thing is that when you start to use Blueprints, it's still based on the C++ language. So it's just that instead of typing, you are connecting codes, or rather you're connecting nodes. So it's visual scripting. You still start to get into the habit of coding in the sense that it's the same language, but just you are working visually. So in a sense, it helps you start to think logically. It helps you start to look at things in a different light. And if you do want to get into coding eventually, you're already one step into that process. Yeah, so the next question that people usually have is that they think they need to have a very powerful system. Now, that being said, the more powerful your system is, the better your experience will be. But you don't have to break the bank essentially. We'll get into system specs very soon. But yeah, especially if you are just starting to learn Unreal Engine, you don't need the biggest, most powerful system to do so. And then if you've ever opened Unreal Engine before or tried to use it, and if it has looked complex, we're going to, take everything step by step in this series, break it down, all the settings, what to do, and hopefully that will, make it easier to come to terms with. So I believe you're in safe hands. All right. System requirements. Let's look at minimum requirements, at least, especially for this class. If you are using a system that has 8 gig graphics card, that's for the VRAM, maybe an RTX 2060 thereabout, you should be good to go. There are still some things we'll adjust in the project settings so that you can follow along, because some things might be too heavy still. Again, that's why it's minimum requirement. You'll be able to follow along and learn, but eventually when you want to start handling bigger projects, you will definitely need to upgrade. Um, you need to have at least 6 cores and 16 gig RAM. Now, what I would recommend is that your graphics card have at least 12 gig VRAM. So in the range of your RTX 3060 and above, 8 cores, 32 gig RAM. And then if you want to really go all out, like all out, if you have a graphics card that has 24 gig VRAM, then you're golden. You're good to go. 12 to 16 cores, 64 gig. You can't go wrong with this. And lastly, what I currently use is a 16 gig graphics card, so somewhere in between these two. It's RTX 5080. It's an i9 with 10 cores and 64 gig RAM. All right, so as we go along this series, if you are using something less than mine, at least you'll have an idea of where you stand and to give an idea of if you need to upgrade or if you're okay, So with this recommended setup, you can handle from small scale, medium scale, even large scale projects, especially once you know how to optimize your projects, right? But when it gets to those very big scenes, the most important thing for me is the VRAM. The more VRAM you have, the heavier or the larger projects you can handle. So one more thing I want to note is that, for you guys to take note, is the graphics card on a laptop is not the same as that on a desktop. So if you're comparing an RTX 3070 on a laptop and a desktop, it's not the same thing. I think a laptop is about 25 or 30% less in terms of performance. So have that in mind as well when you're trying to compare graphics cards. Okay, so to the fun part, by the end of this 5-part series, this is what we are going to be able to create, or you will be able to create. We're going to create still images. We're going to be able to create an animation and then an interactive walkthrough. This will be an exe file. So when we are done in Unreal Engine, we're going to export it or package it, whereby you can run this on your desktop outside Unreal Engine or your laptop, or you can send it to someone else to play and experience. The catch is they need to have a laptop or desktop that also has an RTX graphics card or a good graphics card. So that is the catch, because it's quite graphics intensive essentially. So a quick roadmap of what we'll be doing today, or rather this session, the 5 sessions. So today we're going to look at setting things up. Then we're going to look at lighting for the next module, then materials, then sequencer, and then blueprints. So for today's session, we're going to look at all the things we need to check in our 3D Max file before we export to Unreal Engine. We're going to look at exporting via FBX and Datasmith plugin. Then we're going to create a new Unreal Engine project, look at some project settings, look at the interface as well, and then we're going to import what we've exported with FBX and Datasmith, and that will end today's session. So, I mean, it's not so much, but it's a lot of important things to cover here. So, for the next module, we're going to look at lighting, where we'll look at Lumen, which is the lighting solution for Unreal Engine 5. That's how we're able to get real-time dynamic lighting. Then we're going to look at the different lighting types and their properties. Going to then set up the daytime and nighttime scenario, and then we're going to look at post-process volume, which is like the Photoshop of Unreal Engine. And then even though we're going to look at blueprint in the last module, we're going to do some little blueprints at the beginning or in this module, whereby we'll bring in our first person character and we add collision so that you can move around the scene. So that way start to generate some interest as well. Next module will be materials. This is where we'll bring our scene to life. We're going to look at the material interface, go through all the settings. We'll create a master material, which from there we'll use that to create material instances of different kind of materials like wood, stone, tiles, fabric materials, glass, and the likes. Then for the fourth module, we're going to look at the sequencer. So this is where we'll bring in our cameras and create still images, animations. We'll look at camera settings, how to make keyframes, and then we'll look at how to export our animations using the movie render queue and the render graph. And finally, the last class, we're going to look at blueprints, and we're going to cover 3 major parts. How to switch lighting scenarios. So if you have a daytime scene, nighttime scene, you could even have dusk or sunset. You can have as many scenes as you want or many lighting scenarios. I'll teach you how to swipe or swap between them in Blueprint. Then we're going to look at how to set up a door that can open and close when you get close to it. And then last but not least, we're going to look at how to set up a TV. So fun stuff. And with that, we are ready to start. A few things before we start. The 3ds Max file and some other things that will be used in this series are in my description, so you can download them. You will not necessarily be able to follow along right now, but you'll be able to do so after this live. So it might be best for you to just watch and try and understand, and then after the live you can then try and practice. Okay. Desmond, thank you very much for joining. Thank you. Okay, so let us begin. With the Max file downloaded, if you want to open it up such that the textures and everything shows properly, what you need to do is, first of all, ensure that your projects, so I'm right clicking on the toolbar and enabling projects, which is this, and I just want to set the project as the active project. So wherever you downloaded it, just go to it. I have mine in the folder called apartment. So I have the Max file here. So I'll just select folder, and then once that's done, open apartments. Okay. All right, cool. So this is our apartment. I'm gonna hide the shell. Let me put on the Scene Explorer. Okay. Let me just hide this as well. Okay, good. Okay, so this is our scene. I put them into different layers. So we have the structure, which is basically the walls, floor, ceiling. I have grass here, which we're going to use later in Unreal. Then I have the furniture, pieces, and then lastly, I have props. So for, you know, it's very good to always arrange your scene in a way that makes sense so that when you're taking it to Unreal Engine, you know how to easily arrange stuff as well. So this is very small scene. So I could have just brought in everything at once, but it's just good to have that habit of putting things in the right layers and group. Yeah. So before we, you know, go into Unreal Engine, I want to cover a few things that are important when preparing your model, right? First things first, Unreal Engine works with in centimeters. So that's the default unit in Unreal Engine. And whenever you want to create a max file, let's go to customize unit setup. You want to ensure that your system unit is set to centimeters. Now, once you've done that, your the other units here can be set to anything. This is just for your own, while working in your project, but the system unit should be in centimeters. Otherwise, when you're exporting and importing into Unreal Engine, the sizes might not match. They might come in either too big or too small. So that's very important. Another thing that you want to take note of is when working, so with Unreal Engine 5, the way it works, the way Lumen works as the lighting solution, your meshes have to be solid. So as you can see, these walls I've broken down these walls into different pieces. You should bring them in as solid meshes, not, one plane. Your lighting won't look good if you bring them in as planes. So even if you're modeling in Revit or if you're modeling in Max, when you're done modeling or as you're modeling, try to, make sure that everything is a solid mesh. Now, it doesn't mean that, it must be airtight, which, I mean, if you can, but it should have mass, it should have, thickness, right? So let me undo that. What else do we need to do? Another thing is naming conventions. This is more for, I would say peace of mind, but also if you end up working in a structured way with other creators or in a company, it's good to name your objects so that when you bring them into Unreal Engine, you can easily find things, because when things get very large, you don't want to be, you know, guessing or trying to look for where things are. So essentially, everything right now is properly named. SM stands for static mesh, which is what meshes are in Unreal Engine. So SM is the abbreviation for, or the naming convention for static meshes. As we go along, we'll get to see more naming conventions for different things. Just in case you don't know, let me see. If I go to Tools, Rename Objects, this is a very quick way of naming things in your scene. So basically, you can give something. Okay, so let me just do something quickly. Okay, so these are 3 boxes. So let's say I want to name them cube. I can select 3 of them. The base name will be cube. Prefix will be static mesh, so that's SM underscore. I want them to be numbered. Let it start from 1, and once I rename, you see SM underscore cube 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's a quick way of renaming objects in your scene. Another thing that is very important is your um, well, I would say use of instances. So if you have a lot of meshes that are the same, it's good that you make sure that they are instances. This way, in Unreal Engine, instead of having 4 meshes that are the same, Unreal Engine would just use it. This 4 will be referenced by 1 mesh in Unreal Engine. That way, making things much more optimized. So anywhere you have similar, objects, try and make them instances. So these are all the same. These 2 chairs, armchairs, are the same as well. And now this brings us to one of the scripts that I provided in the link, which is called the instance swap. You can get it on my Gumroad for free. The link is in the description. Another one we'll be using is the FBX exporter, but let's start with this one. So essentially, once you've installed it, this is what it looks like. Let me just give you a preview of how it works. So let's say I make copies of this chair too. So let's say you are done with your project and you realize that, oh, you made a mistake. You need to make these 2 instances. So what I'll do is select these 2. You want to, so let's go to the options. I don't want to match the position. I don't want to match the rotation. I don't want to match the scale. So I'm going to leave these 3 off. Let me see if I go to furniture. Well, they are already renamed, so I don't need to rename them. The most important thing right now is, in fact, I don't need any of these ones because I just need to change them to instances. So what I'll just do is select these 2, pick source object, and select this. And right now it says 2 are now instances. So if I move this, all of them move. So that's one quick way of fixing that, so that way you don't have to, if you make a mistake, you can easily fix that. What else do we need to look at? Yes, another very important thing is your normals. So let me explain. Your normals have to always face the right direction. Let me show you what I mean. If I convert this to an editable poly, and if I flip this face, okay. Now you can't see any difference, but when I go to the object properties, so I'll right click, go to object properties and enable backface call. Because I flipped that face, it doesn't show on the outside. It has been flipped inside. If I can go inside the cube. So yeah, so that face now is showing inside. And this is how Unreal Engine works. Unreal Engine only shows the front face. So when you are working or before you export, it's always good to select your entire project, go to object properties, enable backface call, and just inspect your model and ensure that the faces are facing the right direction. So if you find out that there's a mistake in one of them, so if I flip this, for example, you know that something is wrong. So it's just a matter of selecting it, or right now it's still selected, and I just flip it back. So that's one good way to check. You can also fix this in Unreal Engine, but I think it's best, prevention is better than cure. Try and fix all the issues you can before you get into Unreal. Let me see what else. Yes, pivot points, very important. Um, Anything that you know you want to move, for example, we're going to work with this door whereby we open and close it. You want to ensure that the pivot points are in the right location. Um, for things that you will not be moving, for example, everything in the structure layer, I've set all the pivots to the world origin 00 because I know I'm not going to move them. Other furniture assets like chairs, you can let the pivots be at the bottom, just in case you might want to move them or animate them or something. So it's very important to ensure that your pivots are in the right place. Let's see, I think two more things to look out for. This is not a deal breaker, but again, it's a very good habit to have. You want to ensure that your transforms on your meshes are zeroed out. So what I mean by that is, if I select this wall, for example, on the move tool, because it's at the origin, at the bottom here, you can see 0, 0, 0. If I go to the rotate, it's also 0. If I go to scale, it's 100%. So that way you are sure that when you bring it into Unreal Engine, something will not, mistakenly move or snap or rotate in the wrong direction. Obviously, meshes that have rotations will have rotations right now, so that is unavoidable. But ensure that, I think the most important thing is the scale. The scale should be the right scale. So when you are creating your projects or when you're importing assets, before you start making any changes, ensure that it comes in at the right scale. I think when I brought in some assets for this, they were at a scale of like 10,000 or 10. So to fix that, you can use let me see, where is it? So you go to edit and transform toolbox. This is it. So this is a very good tool for adjusting your pivots and then zeroing out your transforms. So let me make a copy and I'll just move the pivots somewhere here. Okay, so first things first, I can move the pivot to origin. So the pivot moves to origin, or I can move it to the center and it goes to the center of the mesh. And then when I click on Z, it goes to the bottom. So this is a good way to easily or quickly adjust your pivot points. And then if this was the wrong scale, all you need to do is just click on this button, reset X form. That will ensure that it's set to 100. So that is basically that. And I think we've covered all the things we need to look at when, okay, yes, one more thing. So as you can see, I've also broken down the walls into smaller bits. Again, that is because of the way Lumen works in Unreal Engine. You don't want to bring in meshes as like one big lump. You should break things down, otherwise your lighting will not calculate properly. So in as much as I won't say this is overkill. For example, I could have brought in this as one piece, but because this is such a small project and it won't cost me anything, it's good to break things down as much as you can just to ensure that things are properly done. Also, let me unhide. You can see that I have a mesh called shell, and that it covers everything in the scene. Now, again, this is somewhat overkill. I had time to spare. What you're trying to avoid with this is you're trying to avoid light leaks into your project. So let me show you what I mean. For example, there's a very tiny gap in real life. I mean, your door will not touch the floor. This might be too much, but there's a very tiny gap. And if I bring in this scene without the shell, that light will leak in, and it will give you the impression that you can see light under that door, and that will not give you the right impression. In Unreal Engine, you could just bring in a shape and block it, but just to avoid any issues, it's always good to try and block out your scene or make sure it is airtight. And let me just right click, go to object properties and set this to display as box. The same for the ceiling. oops, display as box. So that way we can always just see what is inside and it's still selectable. Okay, what's next? Now we're going to export this file for use in Unreal Engine. The first way we're going to do this is we are going to export via FBX, and the second way is that we're going to export via Datasmith. Now, the FBX format, if you guys check the description, I provided a link where I've shared a script I use to export to Unreal Engine. Looking at it right now, I think it would be best we come back to this once we've created our Unreal Engine file, because some things have to be done here. So I'm going to leave this for now. I'll minimize it for now and let us start with Unreal Engine. Okay. Um, One more thing, just in case you haven't installed Unreal Engine, if you want to do so, you go to Epic Games. Just Google Epic Games. It will bring you here. You'll need to log in, and once you do, you download the Epic Games launcher. Once you install that, this is what you'll see when you open it up. Okay, and then to install Unreal Engine, you click on the plus button. Right now I have several versions installed, but you want to install 5.8. So right now I'm just going to show you what to do. So you click, let me do it again. Click on the plus button. You click on install. By default, it goes to the C drive, which is what I would recommend. But if you don't have any space on your system, you can install it, on your D drive or whichever other drive you have. But I would advise, just let it install on your C drive. One thing you want to check is you want to go to options, and you want to ensure that these four are turned off just in case they are enabled. Essentially, these are for when you want to package things for Android, iOS, Linux, which we won't be doing in this class, and this will just save some space on your system. You can always come back here and install this, if you need to. So once you apply, you then click on install, and it will take quite some time. So I'm going to cancel and close this. Now, this is the Epic Games Launcher, like I said. Let's just go through, some of the different things. With the store, these are mostly game stuff. So I mean, if you're a gamer, you can buy games on the Epic Store. It's essentially it's a game engine. So yeah. If we go to Unreal Engine, which is what we're going to be focusing on, we have different tabs at the top here. So on the news tab, they show you, what's going on with Unreal, the latest. So you can always check out things here, what's going on, very educative and informative. Then we have samples. These are projects that Epic Games provides for free for you to download and play with. If you're just starting out in Unreal Engine, I would recommend you to check out the content examples. This really just shows you a lot of what can be done in Unreal, even beyond, ArchViz. So it's a very good file to download. And then we have our library. Obviously, we have Twinmotion, which was bought by Unreal Engine a few years ago, and we have Reality Scan. Essentially, this helps you. You can use your phone to scan objects in real life and bring them into Unreal Engine. So it's a very nice tool. So back to library. Once you have your Unreal Engine installed, you'll see it here. At the top right here, you see I have 111 gigs. This is the size of all of these four combined. So you see your size here. You will see right now, obviously, if you don't have anything done, it will be empty. So there won't be any projects here, but this is where they all live. And then your library. These are assets I have bought or gotten for free from Fab, which we'll get to over the course of how many years? 6, 7 years. So over time, you end up building your library, because a lot of the time there's no point making things that are already made, and it just help you to speed up your workflow essentially. And then the last tab here is the Fab tab, which is where you can buy assets to use. You can search for free assets. You can even create and sell your own assets here as well. So very good place to check out. I think every once in a while they provide limited free assets. So like every month they provide 3 assets for free. So it's always good to come back and check here every month and download them and add them to your library. Even if you think you might not use it now, it might be handy in the future. Okay, so back to Unreal. I'm going to launch 5.8, which is the latest one right now. So launch. Babade, thanks for joining. I see you. Okay, so I've launched 5.8. We have this window. You have a beginner resource that you can go through. But now I want to start a new project, so I'll click on this. Brings up a new window. Now there are different templates for different things. If you want to make a game, use this template. If you're into, film, use this template. We are doing ArchViz, obviously. And most of these templates, especially the blank templates, as you can see, they are almost, in fact, they are the same thing. It's just that there are some plugins that are enabled by default if you are doing ArchViz as against if you are doing something else. So I would advise always ensure you're on your architecture tab. We're going to start from scratch so that I show you how to build everything. But it will be also good in your spare time to just check out these other projects and see, what's inside. But we're going to click blank. So let's come down here to project location. By default, it would create it in your documents in Unreal Engine projects. So when you install Unreal Engine, it's going to create a folder called Unreal Projects, which is where by default it will keep your projects. You can do that. I want to have mine in my own in the apartment folder where I have the max file, the scripts, the textures. So I'm going to change this to apartments. So I'll select this folder. Now project name. I'm going to call this UE, that's short for Unreal underscore apartments. So that way when I create it, in fact, I'll do that now. So create. So while it's warming up, you see that I have that folder there, so I know that that is Unreal Engine. Okay, so I'll let that boot up. Awesome. Um, so I think before we start to export anything, let us go through the interface and let's get familiar with how to navigate in Unreal Engine. Now I'm going to, because I've been using Unreal Engine, I'm going to close some windows and reset this back to what I think it should look like if you are just starting for the first time. So yes, I believe this is how a blank Unreal Engine file would look like. So we have the outliner, which shows everything you have in your project or in this level right now. So anything I select will also get highlighted in the outliner. Under that, we have the details panel. So everything you select also will have properties that you can adjust. Personally, I prefer to have my outliner on the left. So I'll simply just click on the name outliner and drag it to the left and arrange it like this. And then my details panel can be on the right. So this is how I prefer to work. Doesn't matter, because eventually when you have a very large project, this is going to get quite long, even though we're going to create folders and organize things, but I prefer to have my outliner on this side. Another window that is very important is called the content drawer or content browser. This is where we're going to import our textures, we're going to import our FBX files and Datasmith files into here. So to bring this up, you can click on it here, and when you click out, it goes back in, or you can press Ctrl and spacebar to bring it up. I personally am not a fan of this because it's something that you use a lot, and I don't like that extra step of having to always bring it up. So I'm going to dock in layout, and that way it's always visible. And one more thing, I will just drag it here so that I have my outliner from top to bottom, details panel from top to bottom, and then I have my content browser here. So this is one way a lot of people work. I personally like to have my content browser on this side. Again, for the reason that eventually this list is going to get very long, and I don't like the idea of having to, scroll up and down. So it's easier for me to just switch between the outliner and content browser, but that all depends on you. Okay, there are some other windows we're going to use throughout the class, but I'll introduce them to you as we go along. But let's say, for example, you mistakenly close, a window. So I'm going to close everything, even going to close the viewports. How do you get them back? You can do that by going to Window. So let's start with the viewports. So I'll click on viewport 1. So it brings it back. Go back to Window. We have our outliner. You can have more than one outliner, but I've not seen the need for that before. So that's there. We can also bring back our, let me see, content browser. So the first one, and it remembers where it was before I closed everything. And the last one is details. Where are you? Here. Okay, awesome. So, and the good thing is you don't need to, I don't quote me, but I think when you create a new project, it's going to remember your layout. But definitely on this project, it's going to remember the layout. And if you want to ensure, if you want to save it, you can go to Windows, you can save layouts, and I think it will save it somewhere on this, I don't know if it's inside Unreal Engine or somewhere outside, but you can save your layout. So that's that. Now let us go over some basic interface features, and then we'll go back to 3ds Max and import or export the assets. All right, let's start with some of the icons on this toolbar here. First one is select object, which is, as the name says, we can select our object, and that is done with shortcut Q. So it works like 3ds Max: Q, W for move, E for rotate, and R for scale. So if I press W, I can move. And as you can see, it gives you the distance you are moving. So that's actually quite nice. This is a new update in 5.8, so very nice feature to have. You have your rotate and you have your scale. So you can scale the on 2 axes, which I'm doing right now, or if you go to the center, you can scale on all 3 axes at the same time. So let me undo this. Now, while I'm back on the move tool, right now I'm moving on the world axis. If I rotate this mesh and go back to move, I'm still moving on the world axis. If I want to move on the local axis, I click on this icon here. So right now it says world space coordinates. If I click on it, it goes to local space coordinates, and that way I can move on the axis of the mesh. So if I rotate it, go back to move, I can move on this axis, and once I'm done, I can go back to the world. Now with scale always scales on the local axis, never the world axis. So just have that in mind. All right. Next is let me see. I don't use this all that often, so we might not cover that right now. But this one is very nice. Let me see. Let me bring in a sphere, scale this up, and let me create a cube. Okay, so what this does is it toggles whether objects snap onto the surfaces. So once I enable this and go to my move tool, I have to be on this, I have to ensure my mouse is on the center on that circle. And then once I drag it on top of the surface, it snaps to that surface. So that's very nice tool to have. Also, I can increase the offset. So let's say I type in 30. It was, okay, let me make it more apparent. So let me make it, say, 70. So it will snap to the surface, but always at 70 units from the center. So that's also very nice to have. Let me do something 240, bring this out. So you can see how it works. All right, cool. Next, we have our snaps. I'm sure as you've noticed, while I was moving the mesh, it's snapping right now every 10 centimeters. So if I turn this off, I can move smoothly. If I turn it back on and click on this drop down, you can set it to 1 centimeter, 5 centimeter, 10, 50, depending on what you need. And as you notice, as you change the size, grid, the grid size also changes. That way you know how much you're going to move the object. So set it back to 10. The same applies for your rotation. Right now, it's going to rotate at every 10 degrees. So again, if I turn it off, I can rotate it much smoothly, and you can set what angle you want to rotate. The same with scale, self-explanatory. All right, the next thing we want to look at is these icons here. Right now, we are in perspective, and if I click on this drop down, that's what we have here. We have a camera in our view in this level. So we can pilot it by clicking on this. This is the camera. If I go to my outliner, you see that that is the camera name as well. So if I go in here, I'm right now in the camera view. And while I'm moving, I'm actually moving the camera. If I want to come out of this or stop piloting, I can click on this button, which says stop piloting. And right now, I have actually moved the camera from where it was here to this place. So what else? We can go to your top view, bottom view. Let me zoom out a bit. So these are all your orthographic views and they all have shortcuts. So I'm going to go back to perspective. There are a lot of settings that we don't need to go into right now. Some of them will cover, as you go along. I'm just showing you like the basic ones. Next, here we have your camera speed. Okay, so I'm not even showing you how to navigate. So I think that's actually very important before I move on. So if you've used other real-time engines before, or if you're a gamer, you would know that to move around, you need to press W to move forward, S to move back, A left, and D right. But you have to also ensure that you're holding the right mouse button. So with the right mouse button held, you can move forward, backwards, left, and right, and then Q will go down and E will go up. So those 6 buttons you can easily navigate. Another way you can navigate is by selecting the mesh. Let's say this, for example, I can press F to frame on it, and then hold down Alt button, left click, and orbit around the mesh. So this is like how you would typically navigate in a typical software like 3ds Max. And the last one, which I call lazy navigation, is you can just left click and move your mouse. So it's almost like you are driving. You can move forward, you can reverse, you can turn around. So, when I'm feeling lazy or sometimes it's just an interesting way to navigate. So it's just that you cannot go up or down. This is just at the level that you are, but it's, actually quite nice. So those are the 3 ways. But yeah, this nothing beats, the freedom of holding the right mouse button and just pressing your keys to move around. Okay, so that then brings us back to this camera speed. Right now, this might be too fast or too slow depending on what you're working on. If you're working on a very small scene, you want to adjust the camera speed. So if I take it back up to like, let's say 32, I'm going to move very fast, right? Can bring it down to 0.8, 0.7, and you see I'm moving much slower. A faster way or more intuitive way of doing this is while you're moving, you can scroll. You can use your scroll button to interactively adjust the speed. So while I'm moving backwards, I can scroll down to be slower. I can scroll up to move much faster. So that's a nice way of adjusting your speed without having to come here. Okay, next is your view. What do I call this here? Your view modes. Yeah. So right now we are on lit, which is the default view mode in Unreal Engine. There are several. many you won't need to even bother for a large part of your career. I have never used some of them. We're going to touch the most important ones, obviously, for this series. So right now, on lit, this is the nearest thing to what you have in 3ds Max. So just like a default view without any lighting information. Then we have wireframe only. We have lighting only. So no materials, just white, just lighting information essentially. Don't worry about this bloatout. You'll understand what is going on later. Um, there are some we'll go into that it will make sense to show now, but these four up here are like the ones that are used a lot. So let me go back to lit. One more that we'll use is mesh edges. So it's essentially like your wireframe on top of your lit mode. So we'll come back to these ones later. Um, this one is like it toggles what you can see in your viewport. So let's see what we have. I can disable the atmosphere. I can hide. So they'll be in your scene. You won't just be able to see them. That's what it is. So it's just a visibility toggle essentially. So I can hide the cameras, hide the clouds, hide the fog. What else? So yeah, that's what that does. This one is very important. We're going to touch this a lot throughout the class. So this controls the performance of your projects essentially. Um, so let's see. So we have viewport scalability. By default, it's always set to epic. As the name implies, quality is good. If you are working on something very large and or heavy, while working, you can just set your settings to low, for example. So as you can see, it's really low. You don't see any shadows, but then while you are working, you'll be able to, do what you need to do. So let's see. If I set it to medium, start to get some shadow information, but it's not as clean. And then high is a good balance between quality and performance. Then again, epic is default. If you really want to go crazy, you can go to set it to cinematics. The difference between epic and cinematics is not so much, if I'm being honest, but it's there. The naked eye might not see it, but it's there. But most of the time when working, you want to work with epic or even high, just so that you can easily move around your scene, especially when it gets very heavy. This button here helps to reset whatever you do here. So if I reset this, it goes back to epic. So the same thing applies to materials. You can reduce the quality while working, but most of the time I hardly do that. There are other ways we can optimize materials and textures, which I'll show you in future lessons. And the last one here is screen percentage. So this one is interesting in the sense that this value here will be different for everyone, depending on your project, your PC specs, and what you're working on at that moment. So typically, this should be set to 100%, right? Whereby everything is sharp and nice and crisp. But Unreal Engine it helps to adjust that depending on what it thinks your system needs to run smoothly. So if I drag this down to 25, which is the lowest, you can see that it is very, you know, pixelated. It might not show very well on this screen because it's recorded, but if you try it, you see that it's very pixelated. So obviously, if you check yours and let's say yours is like, let's say 60 or 70, if your system can handle it, you can always override it, and that's by enabling custom and just setting it to 100. That way you see everything, properly. Again, you can go beyond, but it will get to a point where it could actually even crash your system. Now this is an empty scene. It's already not as smooth as it was at 100 or less. So I would advise against that. So let me change that back to 100. Okay. What else? Skipping this one now. We are not going to use this in this course. Then last but not least is the viewport layouts. By default, or most of the time, I'm used to working with one viewport. Even in 3ds Max, I like to work in one viewport. But you have the option to work in the quad view. And you also have the options to, you can work two views. There are different configurations, so feel free to explore. But for most of the class, I'll be using just one viewport. Let me see, have we covered, at least I think I've covered, most of the important interface features that we will need. Again, as we go along the course or the series, we would cover more as we need to. Okay, so let us do a few things here before we go back to 3ds Max. Now, the content browser, like I said, is very important for many things. This is where everything we're going to bring into Unreal Engine is going to live. So our textures, the materials we'll create, the levels we'll create, everything will be in this content browser. And more importantly, they're going to be in this content folder. If you don't do it in the content folder, it's not going to work. That's the way Unreal Engine is structured. So let me go back to documents, the folder. This is where I set up my Unreal Engine. So if I open it, you have the Unreal Engine file. So if you don't want to go to your Epic Games launcher, let me open that again. Sometimes when you launch a project, the Epic Games launcher closes. So you can see that we now have the UE apartment showing up in my project. So if you don't want to always open this and open this from here, you can simply double click here and that will open the project. And this content folder is where everything is going to live. So that's very important. So some house cleaning before we go back to Max. I'm just going to save all. So to save everything, now I'm going to select the content folder. And while inside here, we have well, we have a folder which you can ignore, but we have the main level. As you can see, this level is called main, M-A-I-N. So that is this. And this is the main build data. So this is not that important anymore because we are using Unreal Engine 5. So you can delete it. Essentially, that's in Unreal Engine 4, that would have saved the lighting data information, whereby if I deleted that in Unreal Engine 4, this lighting will cease to exist. But because we are using Lumen, we no longer need that. Okay, so I want to create some folders in here that we're going to use in future, today and in future sessions. So to make a new folder, right click, new folder. I'm going to call this FBX. Going to make another folder for Datasmith. Going to make a new folder for textures. One for materials. And one for maps. Okay, okay, so I would, for the sake of this class, I'll call them levels. Yeah, levels and maps are interchangeable. They mean the same thing, but just to make it, seamless, I'll use levels. Am I missing anything? I think that is enough for now. Okay. All right. So, okay. I know I've been saying we're going to go back to 3ds Max, but there's some more things I want us to look at. There's some project settings that we need to set up as well. So let's do that. So we're going to go to edit and project settings. Okay. I can dock this in here so that I can always just go between my level and my project settings, or I mean you can just maximize it. Either way works. Now there are a lot of settings, but there are just few that we're going to use or that we'll ever need. The first one is, okay, I think it would be good to minimize all this so that it's not so overwhelming. Inside projects, the first one we need is maps and modes. Okay, so let me explain what we need to set up here. Now, by default, if I close this project and open it again, it's always going to open this main level, right? Which is what is set up here. Editor startup map, main level. Now, I would say this is good. Okay, so in the sense that when we create our own levels, we're going to have like, I think 4 or 5 different levels. You might want your project to open with our apartment level that we're going to create, which is fine. It's a small project. It won't take too long to open. But a scenario whereby, let's say you have multiple projects and you want to quickly migrate a material from a past project to your new project. Towards the end, I'll show you how to migrate and things like that. You don't want to spend time opening a large project that can take 5 to 10 minutes to open, because sometimes it can take a long time to open a very large project. So I would say by default, always let it open with this main level so that it opens faster. You can then go to any folder you want, right click, migrate, and close the project. So that's why I would say always leave it at main. But now the one that is important is our game default map. What this means is once we are done with our project and when we export it or when we package it, the map that we want it to start is the map that we're going to set up here. So by the time we create our, okay, don't forget maps and levels, I might interchange them, they mean the same thing. By the time we are done with creating our different levels, we will then come here and set this to the apartment level, right? So that way, once you export it, it will start with the right level. If not, when you export and you run the game, it's always going to open the map that it's set to, which is the blank empty map. So this map is, if I go back to the content, is inside this blank default folder levels. So that is it, and we won't want that. So we will come back to this, much later. Now the next project settings we need to look at is inside the engine section, and we'll scroll down to rendering. Okay, now um, if you are using the minimum based on the specs that we looked at earlier, if you're using a very low-end system, so these are the settings for you that I want you to adjust so that you can follow along and at least as best as you can. Because the way we have it set up right now, this is for like high-end system, and it can get very heavy very fast. Now obviously there'll be a difference in quality on your end, but it will not be so much that it will look so different, but you'll be able to tell, but at least you'll be able to follow along, which is for me more important. So right now, you know what, I'm going to cover for both high-end and low-end systems. So whichever category you fall into, you adjust accordingly. So again, it's a long list, but we just need some important ones, which I'll run through. So for our global illumination, we are using lumen, which is fine. We're not touching that. Same for the reflections. But the reflection capture resolution, this determines how sharp your reflections will be. Now, if you're making a game, for example, this is overkill. It is because we have used the architecture template that is set to 2048. This is essentially 2K. If we used, let's say, the game template, this would have been 128 if I'm not mistaken, because reflections don't need to be super crisp in games. Now before I go on, one thing you notice in Unreal Engine is that when it comes to a lot of numbers, you see they are always to the power of 2. So you see 2, 4, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 2048, 4096, and the list goes on. When changing or adjusting this number, you only want to use powers of 2. Essentially, you only want to divide these numbers by 2. You don't just put in a random number, because Unreal Engine won't be able to, the way it works, it only works with those kind of numbers. So if you're using a low-end system, I can take this down to 256, right? It will rebuild reflection captures. Probably shouldn't have done that from my own end, but anyway, it's going to rebuild the reflection captures, and then it will not be as crisp, but they'll be there, and it will help you, follow along. So I'll let this finish, and I'll go back to 2K. That's 2048. Okay, what next? Now, if you are using the high-end system, you want to use hardware ray tracing on. This gives you very good reflections, very good lighting in your scene. But if not, you are going to disable this, which will automatically disable the second one, which is the ray lighting mode. Now, if you're using hardware ray tracing, you want to change your surface cache to heat lighting for reflections. So that's that. Again, high quality reflections. We can leave this off for now because we can adjust this in our post-process volume. Like I said, that volume has some of these project settings in there, so we can leave that for now. Um, Software ray tracing mode. If you are using a low-end system, leave it at global. If you're using a high-end system, you want to set this to detailed tracing. And then screen tracing source, I'm going to leave that as it is. Let me see, scrolling down. Eventually, we're going to use mega lights, but again, we can configure that using our post-process volume. So we'll leave this for now. Let's see. Yes, also, if you're using a low spec system, disable support hardware ray tracing. I don't want to do this now because it's going to require me to restart the engine, so I won't do that. But if you are, disable that. And with that, I think we are good to go. A few other settings that we'll look into again as we go along so that I don't just bombard you and it makes sense when we get to that stage. So I'm going to close this and let's go back to 3ds Max. Okay, good. Now we're going to export our project and we're going to use two methods. We're going to export via FBX and we're going to export via Datasmith. On my own end, I am making the assumption that we all know how to install the Datasmith plugin and the FBX plugin that I provided in the link, but just for the sake of anyone who is completely new, you want to go to just Google Datasmith and it will take you to the Datasmith plugin. You want to go to the 3ds Max exporter, ensure you're using the latest version, which is 5.8, and download. Very simple to install, just double click, run it. When you do, you select your 3D Max version. Obviously, 3D Max has to be closed when you're installing. And once you are done, and when you go back to 3ds Max, you enable your ribbon and you should see Datasmith here. So that's how to install it. For the FBX script that I provided, so when you download it and extract, that is the ArchViz Studios batch FBX export. So essentially, you just drag this into your viewport and it will install. Once you are done, go to customize user interface. Now I made toolbars for mine. You can start to put them in your code menu, it depends. So but if I go to toolbars, I change my category, you will see ArchViz tools. So if you install both of them, you'll see them up here, and then you can create a new toolbar, give it whatever name you want, and just simply drag those icons into the toolbar, and that's what I have here. So I hope that explains that. It's pretty straightforward. If you have any issues or questions, you can always, after this live stream, just comment in the comment section and I'll respond to you. Okay, now the way I've done it is we're going to export the structure using the FBX script, and we're going to export the rest using Datasmith. So I'm going to show you the two methods and then talk about the pros and cons, and you can decide what method you want to use for future projects. Personally, to be honest, I use both. It depends on what I'm working on. If I'm working on personal projects or I'm working on projects where I have time, I prefer to use FBX because I have a lot more control over what I'm doing. To a large extent, not so much, but the files are lighter. But you know, if the client's work, you are pressed for time, you need speed, then Datasmith is obviously the way to go. So we'll use both and you see, you know, which one works best for you. Okay, so like I said, um, your pivot points, very important. Make sure everything is zeroed out, you know. So the only thing that has the pivot on the object itself is the doors because I want to be able to rotate them in Unreal Engine. Every other mesh right now has its pivot set to the world origin, which is 0, 0, 0. Okay, now let us look at how the script works. So I'm going to run it. I will, okay, I think, let me see. Let me just explain how it works first of all. So I'll select everything. You will see here that it says 26 objects selected, 25 unique meshes. So what that is telling me is that, or basically the way I made this project, these two doors are instances. So if you have instances, it's only going to export one because Unreal Engine only needs to reference one mesh, even though you will have multiple copies of that mesh in your level. So I will select everything. I want to browse. I want to browse to the FBX folder. Okay, let me see. 1 second. Apartment. Okay, so I'm going to create an FBX folder here and also going to create a Datasmith folder as well. Okay, good. Now the way this works, with everything selected, I'm going to browse to the FBX folder. Now the next thing is the Unreal Engine content path. What I want to do is go back to Unreal Engine, go back to the FBX folder, or rather right click on it, copy the path and replace it with this. So we have game FBX. So what this does is the moment I click export, going to do one by one, as you can see, it's going through them one by one. It has exported the meshes, and what I now simply need to do is import them into the FBX and then press Control and V. So the way the script works is you export. So it has done two things. Let me go back to Max. It has exported the meshes in our FBX folder, which we have here, and then it has also made references in Unreal Engine, which by the time I import them, I just have to press Ctrl and V or edit and paste, and those meshes will appear in the right location. So just helps to make the work faster. Now, before we import, we need to make a new level. Like I said, we're not going to use this main level. Let me delete this cube. So I'm going to go to levels to create a new one. And so you right click, again, I'm in levels folder, right click, level. I'm going to call this apartment. And I'll double click to open. Yes, I want to save everything. Okay, good. So in our new level is blank, nothing here at all. If you go to your outliner, it's completely empty. So we're going to build this entire level from scratch. Now it's time to import. So I'll go to the FBX folder, right click, import to current folder. And then I'm going to search for the FBX. So apartment, FBX, select everything and open. This brings up a new dialog box with more settings. A lot of settings, don't worry, you get used to it. Over time, it will become second nature. Now, as usual, there are lots, but there are just few that we need, and I'm going to take you through everything. And the good thing is, once you do this in this project, the next time you want to import something else, it's going to remember what you used the last time. So unless you create a new project, you just follow the same steps next time. So let's start with top. Let me see. Okay, so I'm going to expand builds under common meshes. You want to just ensure that these four are enabled. We compute normals, we compute tangents, this one and this four should be enabled. So that's fine. Scroll down a bit. Now, static meshes, we want to disable collisions. We are going to make them ourselves when we import. So disable this for now. I'll minimize this back. Under build, if we are going to use Nanite. Nanite is another solution in Unreal Engine that came in with Lumen that helps to optimize your meshes. I want you to see it in action, so I'm going to disable it for now. We'll enable it later. So for now, just disable it. But in future, in your own projects, you can leave them enabled. Okay, so I'm going to disable that. Scroll down. We don't want skeletal meshes, so I'm going to disable it. Even if you leave it enabled, nothing will happen. But just to ensure no mistakes are made. So disable that. Let me see. Animations, we are not importing animations, so I'll disable that. Materials, we don't want to import materials, so I'll disable that. We're going to create our materials from scratch in Unreal Engine, so I'll disable that. Textures, disable as well. And I think that is basically it. So next time you want to import more FBX files, it will remember your settings. So I'm going to click on import. Okay, and save. Now the last step now is just to go to edit and paste. So the object has all these meshes have now been pasted into the scene. That is just the power of using this script I provided. The other scripts that you will just export, and let me show you how you will do it manually. So okay, first of all, we are in lit mode, and because there's no light, we can't see anything. So I'm going to change this from lit to unlit, just so that we can see. I'm going to delete this. What you will do typically is you will drag in all the meshes, right? And then go to the details panel and zero out everything. So it comes into the right place. Where there would be issues, let me hide this shell and hide the ceiling, is when it comes to, for example, the door. We only exported one static mesh. So if you have instances in your project and you want to bring them in manually, you would then have to start to, move them. Let me disable this. You will have to start to move them yourself manually, bring in another door. It's not the best, which is why, let me go back to my outliner, delete everything, and paste it again. Okay, good. So that way we brought in our um, structure into Unreal Engine. Now, in the outliner, it will be good to, keep things organized and arranged. So I'm going to put this into a folder called FBX, since just so that everything makes sense from the folder to the content browser to the outliner. So there are two ways you can do this. You can click on the plus icon here to create a folder, call it FBX, and move your static meshes inside, or with everything selected, you can also just press the icon and it automatically move them into the folder. So I'll call this FBX, and that way we've imported them. Okay, so I'm just going to hide these two for now so that when we import the rest, we can see. So I'm going to go back to Max, hide the structure. Next, we're going to export the furniture and grass. We'll do the props later because the furniture and grass, actually, let's just do the furniture alone. The grass and the props, we're going to import them later after we've covered materials. These ones right now, we're not going to import them with materials because, again, the whole point of this series is to teach you how to create your materials. And to be honest, a lot of times the materials from 3ds Max don't convert so well in Unreal Engine, depending on how complex they are. You know, Datasmith doesn't convert um, composite or layered materials very well. So the simpler your materials are in 3ds Max, the easier to convert to Unreal using Datasmith. But then it will still be good for you to replace the materials with the ones you actually create if you want to get the best, quality. So I can close this for now. So I'll select everything and click on export selected. I'm going to look for my Datasmith folder and make sure you call this the name of the level or layer, just so that everything makes sense. So furniture, right spelling. Okay, and save. So to export. While it's doing that, just to be sure that I have, okay, so I have my Datasmith folder as well. Always save as often as you can. It's always a good habit. Unreal Engine can be, funny sometimes. So you want to save as often as you can. Okay, it's done. Now I'm going to import with Datasmith. You come to this icon here. Quickly add to project icon. Click on this. You see Datasmith. Now this won't have been here if, let's say, you set up a new project with another template. Let's say, for example, game template. And just to show you how to install, just how to enable this in case you make that mistake, you can go to Edit, Plugins, and type Datasmith. And what you want to enable is Datasmith importer. Once you do that, you need to restart the engine for it to take effect. So that's just a tip. So I'll go back here, click on Datasmith, and I want to import the file. Search for Datasmith. So it comes with the Datasmith asset file and then the assets that come with it. So I'll just click on this and open. Ensure that you select your Datasmith folder before you say OK, so that it will import into the folder. Then you have some options. We want the geometry. Again, for the sake of, for this series, we're not bringing in the materials for the furniture. So no materials, no lights, no cameras, just the geometry. And I'm going to import. Okay, good. So we've successfully imported assets using FBX and Datasmith. And let me see, that basically covers our class today, or the scope of our class today. But just so that we appreciate, what is going on, I'll just go a little bit further and let us, add some light just so that we can appreciate our scene. So going to go to, again, we'll go much deeper into lighting next class. So I'm not really going to explain too much, but just so that we can appreciate what we've imported. I'm going to go to Window, Environment Light Mixer. I'm going to add skylight, directional light, sky atmosphere, volumetric cloud, and height fog. Obviously, nothing, you can't see any different because I'm still on lit mode. Maybe I should have gone to lit first, but it doesn't matter. We'll cover this next week. So when I go to lit mode, we now have our scene. I can unhide. So I hid those meshes by selecting and pressing H. If you want to unhide, that's Control and H to bring back everything. And obviously our scene is quite dark because we don't have anything, we have not applied the glass. So okay, I will do that as well, just so that you have something to look at and appreciate before the next class. So in our materials folder, let me see. Okay, instead of creating a material, we're going to look at the engine folder. So Unreal Engine comes shipped with some assets that are very helpful when creating your own project. So to do that, or to show your engine folder in your content browser, you see this gear icon. Click on it, and you want to enable engine content. So you can see it here. With the engine content enabled, you want to scroll down. There are lots of folders, so I think it's best to just search for it. So I'll click on engine content and type glass. Let me see this mi_ms_glass. I will just drag and drop it on the curtain wall here and the other side here, and maybe, yeah, these are glass doors as well. So I think at least this way you can come into your scene. Again, it looks very weird and interesting, but don't worry, we're going to cover all of this in the next class. But I think this is a good starting point. Have our project in Unreal Engine. A lot of it, I would say, once you are done with the engine folder, well, I personally just like to turn it off because it can get very, weird. So just when you're done, turn it off. It doesn't remove what you've already used it for. Okay, so I think I like where we are. As usual, save. And yes, that is it for today. So just a recap of everything at least some of the things we've done today. We have looked at the things we need to go through or be mindful of when creating your scenes in 3ds Max. There are about 7 or 8 points. So very important, your scene units, your pivot locations, the fact that you should break down your meshes into smaller bits. You don't want to bring in all the walls as just one mesh. It will not give you the best lighting. It will work, but it won't just give you the best lighting. So the more you can break down your project into smaller pieces, the better. um then obviously we've looked at how to export with FBX, how to export with Datasmith. We've seen how to create a new project. We've looked at, project settings for high-end and low-end systems. Again, there are a lot more that we'll go into as the series progresses. We've created our own level. We've imported our static meshes via FBX and Datasmith. So I think that covers it for today. Thank you very much for attending. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment section. I will be available to answer any questions you have. So this is session 1 of 5, and I will see you guys same time next week. Thank you so much for attending, and I hope by the end of this session you will have something that you'll be very proud of, and this will help you to just carry on with Unreal Engine and really you know push through. Again, ignore all these warnings. We'll get all of that in good time. So yeah, signing out, and thank you very much. See you next week.